assume that you've already listened to the story that I've posted on the site. I just want to make sure that you make the most of it. So you must translate it. You must understand the story. Simply listening to Greek without understanding what it means is useless. So use the pause button to work through the story phrase by phrase until you understand every phrase. Practice saying each phrase, actually verbalize it as fast as I do. Review this process until you can understand the entire story at speed without translating it into English. The hard part is to think in Greek from the beginning. Don't be in too much of a hurry and end up taking the English shortcut. It's going to be easy to simply translate it in English at this point, but don't do that. Take a little extra time and work through it until you can understand it without thinking in English. It's difficult to train your mind to do this at first, but it's a skill that you simply must adapt. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions about the story now, and this is how I'd like you to work through these questions. Only work through the story questions after you have completely become familiar with the story. I've written out the questions and answers to help at the beginning. It's useful to see the letters of the sounds that I'm producing, so I have those for you, but I want you to become so familiar with it. I want you to review it so often that you can simply understand it by listening to it. I also want you to be able to respond, stop the recording, stop the video, and try to answer it before I do. You should review this until you can answer and ask the questions just like I do. Use the pause button to allow yourself time to answer these questions. O Dikeopolis estin Athenaeos? Ne Dikeopolis estin Athenaeos. Athena kale? Ne pole kale. Pou Dikeopolis uki en tes Athenes. O Dikeopolis uki en tes Athenes. Pou uki? O Dikeopolis uki en tus agrus, afturgos skaristi. U agru esti kalu? Ne estin. Kalosun estin ovios. U halapos estin ovios. Tiun halapos estin. Ai poni o Dikeopolis. Ti ai poni. O kleros esti makros deo ponos. Ti lei o Dikeopolis. O Dikeopolis tenazi ke lei o zef halapos estin ovios. Ovios estin polus kakos. Ischioros estin ke oknos polakis u chieri. O Dikeopolis filiton vion? Ala filiton ikon ke ton kleron. O kleros parechisiton ikonon? Ne parechi polunsiton ala ikonon. Now I will interact with the word study section in this chapter on page 3 and 4, and then interact with some of the points of grammar in the following section. I will leave the historical reading for you to learn entirely on your own. Being able to spot English derivatives often helps with Greek vocabulary and will improve your English spelling. Transliteration is important to keep in mind when looking for derivatives. There are a few transliteration patterns that might disguise the English derivative by making it sound different than the original Greek word. Take a look at your transliteration chart on page 16, that is XVI, Roman numeral XVI of your introduction. I will highlight the transliteration patterns that make the English sound different than the Greek. Eta is often transliterated long E, and so we see here in epidemos, it will be transliterated as epidemic, as just an E. Kappa is transliterated as C, sometimes K, but generally as C. So kuklos will be transliterated as cycle. So you can see the kappas. First one's soft, second one is hard, sounding quite a bit different than kuklos. That brings up the next letter. Upsilon is often transliterated as Y. and we see that in cycle, or in udor dunamis. Notice that rough breather, too, on udor will be transliterated as an H. So we get hydro from udor, and then dynamics from dunamis. He is transliterated CH and always pronounced hard CH. So horos will produce the English derivative chorus. Wikipedia has a great list of English derivatives from Greek roots. So I would encourage you to look Wikipedia up on Google, search for English-Greek derivatives, and you should be able to find it pretty easily. Take a look at the word study section on page 3 in your text, and we'll run through those words. Anthropology, then using the transliteration chart, we would see comes from anthro and logos, log, the study, the word, the matter of man. Polysyllabic comes from polio. Remember, the Y is transliterated form of upsilon. Sil is actually coming from soon. Nasals before liquids, L and R, will assimilate. So the nasal M and N will change to an L or an R when they precede them. And this is true in English as well as Greek. So soon meaning with, and lav meaning take. So these are syllables that take many sounds along with them. Many words that take many sounds, take many things, many syllables along with them. Philosophy, coming from philo, love, and soph, or sophie, wisdom, one who loves wisdom. Microscope, from micro, small, and scope, meaning to examine. All right, part 1. Before we can search in earnest for derivatives, I must introduce 3 parts of a Greek word. I like to call these root, stem, and ending. Root is the core of a word and identifies lexical meaning. Stem identifies the part of speech and finer points of grammar, such as verb aspect and sometimes voice. Endings simply show number, person, and timing, normally voice. So, CRI, coming from the Greek kappa rho iota, can be used with different stems, as in critic, which is a noun stem, or a verb stem, criticize. And we can throw endings to change the number and person. So we could throw an ending on and we get critics, or they criticize versus he criticizes for singular. It's funny, we have S for singular on a verb and S for plural on our nouns. When looking for derivatives, we must be aware that not all of the letters will match, since we will be using the roots, but swapping out Greek stems and endings for English stems and endings. Unfortunately, Athenaze only uses 2 terms, stem and ending, to describe these 3 parts. This causes confusion when we need to distinguish root from stem and stem from ending. So for consistency, I will use the 3 parts, root, stem, and ending, and I will point out those distinctions in the text. The last paragraph on page 3 uses stem twice when it should be root. And the first paragraph of part 1 should have root instead of stem as well. As far as root, stem, and ending are concerned, things are a little different in Greek. Some stems will have letters that precede the root. Likewise, there are endings that precede stems and roots. A word of caution, prepositional prefixes will always appear prior to all of these. So what will happen is we'll end up squeezing some endings and stems in between the prepositional prefix and the root when we get to those tenses in quite a few chapters to come. In the first several chapters of this text, we will only see the atelic stem. That is a stem that indicates some idea of progression, incompleteness, attempt, repetition, or habitual behavior. This stem is represented by an epsilon or omicron, and the omicron appears prior to nasals, epsilon prior to other letters. This chapter only uses 1 verb ending, and that is the non-past, also called the primary ending, 3rd person singular. This ending contracts with the atelic stem to form the digraph that we see in lui and fili. This chapter highlights 3 roots. When liu is followed by the atelic stem and third singular non-past ending, it looks like lui. The root epsilon in file contracts with the stem ending to form fili. Notice that the accent changes. This will tip you off that the root actually has a final vowel that is able to contract with the stem ending vowels. Luo lui there should show you that upsilon is not able to contract. It's a vowel that doesn't contract. Iota is the other one that doesn't contract. The 3 that we do see contracting are epsilon, alpha, and omicron. And we're going to generally see the epsilon types through the initial chapters of this text. The accenting principle for verbs is recession. It will move as far forward as it is able toward the third to last syllable. That is, as far forward as possible. The third to last syllable, remember the last 3 syllables are the only ones that are available for accenting. And verbs will want to get to that third to last as often as they can. A long ultima will slow everything down, will only make the last 2 syllables available. Thus, lui is accented on the second to last syllable, and fili was as well before that syllable was lost in the contraction. So the accent thus remains in that general area, but now on the final syllable of verbs like fili. Estine is irregular in its ending and its accenting. It is an enclitic, meaning that it will normally not be accented. And when you learn when it must, it will be accented on its final syllable. It also has a movable nu, which you can read about in your text. Part A in this section has a great explanation of natural gender versus grammatical gender. In Part B, noun roots, stems, and endings are introduced. For consistency, I would change the word stem in the first paragraph in Part B to root. The root is what gives the meaning of the word. The important material in this section and chapter is to get a feel for the sound of the nominative case, typically the subject, and the accusative case, the form that will be used for the direct object of a verb. For example, in English, our objective case, the accusative case, in our pronouns has a nasal sound to it. Him, them, versus he and they. So try to get that, and it's nice. In Greek, it has that same nasal sound. Will be the mark of the accusative so far, and s will be the sound of the subject. Part C should not be ignored. Articles and adjectives will always match the nouns they modify or describe. Section 3 lays the groundwork for an important skill that will come into play later. It also makes important distinctions between types of verbs that we will use when we discuss Greek verb voice. Notice that transitive verbs are the only types of verbs that are able to take an object. The Greek definite article has many more uses than the English word the. The first of those further uses is the possessive pronoun, his, her, your, my, or the plural forms of those words. I recommend keeping a grammatical notebook with systematic and comprehensive lists of the grammar presented in my course in this text. By now, you should have 2 sections. The first page should be dedicated to accenting and list the general accenting rules. This information is covered in the introductory material. Specific rules regarding accenting will be coming soon, so leave space for that. The second page should be dedicated to article uses. The first use is to show that something is specific or definite, and the second is that the article may be used in place of a personal pronoun. Thank you for working through all of the material for Chapter 1. You're not finished until you can go back and read the story without thinking of it, without translating it into English, where you can read it at speed just as fast as I can, where you can interact with the questions or produce your own just as easily as I did. So basically become completely fluent with just a short story. You also do all of the material in the workbook. I expect you to do that, and Later, there will be stories in there as well, so that's just assumed. Do all the material in the workbook. And also review the vocabulary until you get all the vocabulary correct 6 times in a row. Okay, keep up the good work, and I'll look forward to working with you in the next section.